19 years ago, there was a game. Well, games in the arcade flight action genre have released plenty of times before. They've all tried to capture people's attention time and time again. For lots of games, in regard to becoming well-known franchises of this genre anyway, luck was never on their side, and any victories they may have had didn't last long. One franchise stands out in this regard, though. Having started with what could best be described as a prototype before taking steps to evolve the gameplay and storytelling with the next two entries, the fourth entry combined those two elements in the ultimate test. One that the game would pass with flying colors given its sales figures and status today. Of course, this success would eventually lead to a conundrum. Where would the developers take this franchise now that they've figured out what works for it in regard to both gameplay and storytelling? Well, they would continue to play to their strengths they had acquired over these past entries, pushing the limits of gameplay, graphics, story, music, and more. With the formula now down, the team could afford to expand their visions for how they wanted the future games to feel and what kinds of stories they wanted to tell, to specialize in a particular area to have an entry stand out amongst the others. And with this next entry in the Ace Combat series, the second game in the Holy Trinity, the developers ensured that they pushed themselves even further to achieve that new goal. The fact that a fifth Ace Combat game was given the clearance for takeoff is really impressive when you take a look at the big picture for a moment. As a reminder, Ace Combat 3 Electrosphere was considered a financial failure amongst Namco, meaning that Ace Combat 4 Shattered Skies, also known as Distant Thunder in Europe, had less resources to work with. Despite having fewer resources, the Ace Combat 4 project team managed to create a game that was not only more beloved by most people, but also more financially successful. I don't mean to throw shade to anyone whose favorite Ace Combat game is Ace Combat 3. At that time, Ace Combat 4 became the franchise's best-selling title. The game would hold on to that crown for around 20 years or so, until Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown became the new king of the franchise in terms of sales figures. Focusing back on the 2000s, it's very possible that in an alternate timeline, Ace Combat 4 could have sold poorly, and as a result, the Ace Combat franchise could have died right then and there. So the fact that Ace Combat 5, along with every other title since then, got their opportunity to be released at all is amazing. It seemed as if the developers, who were renamed as the now well-known and beloved Project Aces team, knew this fact. As Kazutoki Kono put it in an interview recounting Ace Combat's journey before the release of Ace Combat 6, if Ace 4 was a curveball, Ace 5 was a fastball aimed straight over the plate. I remember telling the staff, a chance to make a game like this only comes along once or twice in your career, and I truly believe we created a high benchmark for the style of the series. He also added, I approached the project as if it were the last one I would ever do, so I took every idea in my head and tried everything to make them a reality. I believe that the developers realized how close of a call Ace Combat 4 was. Perhaps it's this ideology that has driven them to not only give it their all with games like Ace Combat 5 and 0 for the PlayStation 2 Holy Trinity specifically, but for all of the other entries in the future, even if not all of those future entries have been as good. But those games are for another day. Focusing back on Ace Combat 5, right out the gate, Project Aces knew they wanted this game to tell a more in-depth war story centered on you and your squad. Compared to the previous entry, where the story was told through the perspective of a civilian and the enemy, here in Ace Combat 5, the story is told through you, your wingmen, and your allies. It was through this desire to have the player be more connected with the story that the theme of being a squadron leader was born. I'll wait until we get to the gameplay and story sections of the video to talk about specific mechanics and themes that come with this decision, but here in the context of the game's development, the aim was to have the player feel more connected with the story by having them more involved with it. You can't do any fighting in the air without aircraft though, right? Project Aces wanted to ensure that the aircraft were as detailed as possible for this game, especially given the improved graphics that this game would have. For the first few Ace Combat games, the developers had to settle with books about aircraft, watching movies, and getting as many pictures as they could from other forms of media. Ace Combat 4 was the team's first big breakthrough when it came to seeing the aircraft up close and in person for references, thanks to the Ace Combat 4 exhibition at the Atsugi Air Show. With Ace Combat 5, Project Ace's staff were allowed to get up close and personal with a lot of the aircraft again. Here, they could get as many references as they needed for both the exterior and interior of lots of aircraft. Pre-existing pictures of the aircraft and cockpits can only get you so far. Being there to see the aircraft for real allows you to mark down every single aspect and detail about it. Not to mention, just being there and seeing these awesome aviation war machines to begin with is a thrilling feeling on its own. Of course, the developers didn't have access to every single aircraft they wanted to include, and so they did the best with what they had, both in the visual references department and the gameplay. Once again, the developers emphasized that they wanted the game to be fun first and foremost. They were willing to sacrifice realism in order to make the game as fun as possible. Apologies if this section is shorter than you may have expected, but there was less information about this game's development that I could find compared to Ace Combat 4. Other parts of what was referenced in this interview on SoftBank Games I'm saving for later, as it contains references to gameplay mechanics or story beats. That being said, given there wasn't much in the way of developmental woes or any groundbreaking stories, it sounds like business was usual for Project Aces for the development of this game. The only sorts of issues regarding this game that I could find were audio issues with how many lines there were and all of the management that went into that. Other than that though, it sounds like the process was pretty smooth as things can get in the world of video game development anyway. A much needed change of pace, I imagine, from the hectic and stressful development of the previous game. There is one more thing I want to mention here while we're still in the development section, and that is the pre-order bonus. Back when Ace Combat 7 Skies Unknown was about to release, if you pre-ordered the game for PlayStation, you would get a port of Ace Combat 5 as a pre-order bonus. For Xbox, you would get Ace Combat 6 Fires of Liberation as the pre-order bonus. At first, people thought that this could have been a remaster of Ace Combat 5, but it was just a port with enhanced graphics and performance, which I think is still solid. There was also a bit of confusion around this time as to why Project Aces couldn't offer this Ace Combat 5 port as a standalone game, but that ultimately came down to the aircraft licensing. If they wanted to charge money for Ace Combat 5 as a standalone product, they would need to essentially reactivate all of the licenses for the aircraft in that game. And given how long Ace Combat 7 was stuck in developmental hell for, which equals a lot of money spent on it, it's likely that Project Aces didn't have the budget for something like that, and Bandai Namco wasn't about to give them any more money for that venture. Meaning that, unless you seek out the European version of the digital deluxe edition of Ace Combat 7, this pre-order bonus opportunity has long since passed, unfortunately. The core gameplay of Ace Combat 5 is buttery smooth, just like how it was with Ace Combat 4. The game follows the tried and true formula of there being a mission briefing, be it a traditional or emergency in-flight briefing depending on the mission, followed up with you picking an aircraft for yourself and your wingmen, which I'll elaborate on later, and then heading out for the mission at hand. Once again, paying attention to the briefings for each mission is crucial to understand the context of what's going on. There may be reminders from your allies on what's going on, but you'll be left in the dark as to what is exactly going on if you zone out during a briefing. It's doubly important to be paying attention because this will also help you with how you want to tailor your squadron's formation for the mission at hand. After Mission 4 is where the campaign opens up, as from that point on, you get to pick the aircraft that you and your wingmen will fly for the mission at hand. The way that the weapons work for the aircraft in this game is a little different compared to both the previous and future entries. There are a lot more aircraft in this game that you can fly. 53 of them to be exact. However, each aircraft only comes with one special weapon. You can't choose from a group of them here, you just get what you get. Personally, I do think this is a negative towards the game. A small one since the rest of the gameplay that I'll talk about in a bit is very strong, but a negative nonetheless. Regardless, this means you'll have to be more strategic with how you want your formation to be. Of course, a purely air-to-air mission will mean you'll want to pick a formation with fighters equipped with air-to-air special weapons, but when there's ground and or naval threats mixed in, this is when things can get interesting. You could fly an attacker for air-to-ground threats and have your wingmen and fighters for air-to-air threats. You could have a balanced formation of 2 attackers and 2 fighters. You could have one multi-role with an air-to-ground special weapon, the rest of your squad being air-to-air oriented, and more possible formations. More options and possibilities will unlock as you acquire and buy more aircraft, with the way that the aircraft are unlocked in this game also being different. Rather than a simple complete the level to unlock an aircraft that can be bought with credits kind of system, Ace Combat 5 uses a tech tree aircraft family hybrid format. The developers said that they wanted to give the players a reason to use every aircraft in the game, as even they didn't pick all of the aircraft to fly during their playtime with Ace Combat 4. So they went with this tech tree aircraft family hybrid format. You have to fly and fight in the previous aircraft in a family in order to unlock the next single one or set of them. In some instances, such as the YF-23 for example, it's just the aircraft on its own that can be bought. With each mission, as you and any wingmen who fly the aircraft in question get kills, this bar begins to fill up. Fill up that bar completely in order to unlock the next aircraft in that family's tech tree. Think of this as a simplified version of a War Thunder tech tree, except grinding out Ace Combat 5's tech trees can be done in days instead of years, is actually fun, doesn't require you to get a bachelor's degree in aviation science to perform at your absolute best in order to make the most progress in a match. You don't have to sell your soul to a corporation for a premium account each year in order to boost your earnings to make the grind slightly less painful, and if you get shot down, all you have to do is hit retry instead of needing to go into debt with repair costs and the utter rage of this being your 5th game in a row where you get shot down first without getting any kills to at least break even on those Silver Lion repair costs. In other words, Ace Combat 5 openly invites you to keep playing it in a healthy relationship instead of War Thunder's trickery where you'll only realize what's happening once you're too deep into the toxic relationship to want to back out. When did this become an anti-War Thunder video? I don't know, but as someone who gave it a try a while back before getting burnt out, I'm all for it. In any case, once you unlock an aircraft, you'll be able to buy that aircraft 4 times, since it'll be you plus 3 other wingmen with you on most missions. The special weapons in question are mostly the same, with a couple of new ones added into the mix this time. We've got UGBs, XAGMs, XMAAs, and XLAAs, the QAAMs, which have been nerfed to the ground in this game, as in it's not even worth it to take an aircraft equipped with these anymore. And some new ones, such as the electronic countermeasure pod for the EA-18G, and the tactical laser system for the Falcon. The general theme is that the aircraft type, those being fighter, multi-role, or attacker, plus jammer in the EA-18G's case, dictates the special weapon. Fighters usually get air-to-air, multi-roles get either, and attackers get air-to-ground, with there being some exceptions such as the F-16, a fighter being equipped with UGBs for example. Once you pick the aircraft for you and your squadron, it's time to take to the skies. Like I said at the start of this section, the core gameplay loop of this game is buttery smooth, the same words I use for describing Ace Combat 4's gameplay. If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? You can get into that zen-like state where you're in the flow of things, going from one target to the next, all of your shots being on point, narrowly dodging a missile or cannon fire before wiping out the target that tried to take you out. It can all result in some incredible runs and moments in the game. Even more so when your wingmen are following through on the orders you gave to them, where they shoot down someone chasing after you or score a multi-kill and more. Speaking of those wingmen, here's how they work. After the first couple of missions in the campaign, you go from being a member of the squadron that you're a part of to being the leader of it. This concept was brought to reality in the game as a result of the developers wanting the player to be more involved with the story, giving orders to and looking out for other squad mates, not just fellow pilots of the same nation, means that bonds and connections with those wingmen can be formed. Beyond just the gameplay of telling them what to do, you have an opportunity to really care for them, to get emotionally invested in seeing them live through the war. Focusing back on the gameplay mechanics of how they work, you have 3 different orders you can give them, plus a 4th order regarding the use of special weapons. Attack, disperse, cover, and special weapon are your available orders to give. The attack order will have your wingmen go after any enemies in front of you. The disperse order will have them split up and go after their own targets. The cover order will have them protect you from any enemies who have you in their sights. And the special weapon order simply tells them whether or not they can use their special weapons. It's a pretty simple order giving system, which is a good thing. Any further complexities from here would mean the system would be difficult to work with given the micromanaging you would have to do between flying your own aircraft and managing your squad. Simple but effective is the name of the game here. here, as your wingmen can go on an absolute tear at times. Of course, you're still going to be doing most of the heavy lifting in comparison to the combat capabilities of your allies, but given your status as the lead fighter of not just your squadron, but of the Ocean Air Force in the game, it makes sense in the context of the world you're in. And also, let's be real with ourselves here, we wouldn't want our squad mates to be constantly stealing our kills, right? I've seen mentions of how Ace Combat 5's wingman AI is bad, but personally, I didn't see that during my campaign playthrough for this video, nor whenever I've played the game on my own in my free time. I will concede that in games such as Ace Combat 0, for example, Pixie's AI is better than your squad mate's AI here in Ace Combat 5, presumably as a result of better programming and being able to have the wingman AI on just one instead of 3 others, but I don't agree with the statement that they're flat out bad. They can get the job done when they're ordered to do so. They can also be really fun to talk to. Yup, you heard me right. You can communicate with your wingmen. Although you are still a silent protagonist, the game utilizes a yes-no response mechanic. Occasionally, your wingmen or other allies, and even enemies in a few rare instances, will ask you a question that you can say yes or no to. Left on the D-pad for yes, right on the D-pad for no.
There's way too many signatures on radar. Kid, Nagase, how about you guys?
My radar is showing strange results as well. Something's going on.
Therefore, I ask you, citizens of Uctomania, do not fear us, but rather join us in... Hey, you think it's gonna be that easy? I don't think so either. Kid, that's a big...
It's up to you to fill in the blanks on what exactly Blaze says in response, but this actually works to further immerse you in the role of the squadron leader. This leaves room for you to give a response. I found myself giving audible responses to my TV when saying yes or no to a question. Even though the squad is just code in a video game, I was able to get so immersed that I felt as if I was truly there with my squadron. This is a mechanic that I really wish would come back at some point. Keeping the status quo of your main character being a silent protagonist while still being able to talk with people while utilizing the silence to further immerse you in the game is something that I really want to see again in the future. The enemy AI in this game acts great. For reference, my campaign playthrough in this video was done on the hard difficulty, and the AI behaved accordingly. On the easier difficulties, they won't put up as much of a fight and damage dealt won't be severe, but on the harder difficulties, they can and will put up a hell of a fight. And the Holy Trinity difficulty of only 1 missile or a few AA gunshots being enough to take you out on those harder difficulties is here too. From the Nugget just getting their bearings to the Ace looking for a true challenge. As frustrating as getting shot down can be, especially with no checkpoints, because there aren't any BS moments from the enemy AI, minus some enemy aces using flares when you don't have access to them, any deaths are the result of your flying, further emphasizing the need to put those skills to the test. Outside of the campaign, Mobius 1 makes a return through the arcade mode, Operation Katina. Here you take on the role of Mobius 1 again, a year after the Continental War against Erusia came to an end. A group calling themselves Free Erusia, a group of Erusians who refuse to acknowledge the ceasefire and want to continue fighting, are growing stronger by the day. It's up to Mobius 1 to put a stop to this rebel army. Each mission is short, featuring a specified number of targets that you have to destroy, and a timer that has time added to it for every enemy that you shoot down. At the end of a mission, your score and remaining time all get converted into points, which add up over the course of your playthrough. Occasionally, you'll be asked to go down a specific path, but the objective of each level remains the same, just with different environments. At the end of it, you get a final rating and get a leaderboard placement for that particular run with the aircraft that you did. A short but sweet and to the point mode. Kazutoki Kono also stated that he really wanted to have the split screen versus mode make a return as well, but it ultimately came down to either adding that or the arcade mode. I'm ultimately happy that Project Aces decided to go with the arcade mode. More content for introverted me who likes to fly solo to dive into. Quite ironic of me saying that given the squadron leader theme of Ace Combat 5. Taking a look at the peripherals of the game next, the graphics are a considerable upgrade from the previous title. I still stand by my statement that Ace Combat 4's graphics are great to look at to this day, but I also can't deny the improvements that this game has made. Of course, going back to the game today through the traditional method of a PS2 with the AV cables, you'll probably be going, "Damn, things didn't look this fuzzy to me back then. Thankfully, the pre-order bonus port for PlayStation or acquiring the game through other means that the graphics nowadays can really look the part. In particular, the pre-order port for PlayStation looks really nice, given that things are professionally tuned by the devs themselves there. Sound design-wise, once again, Project Aces nailed it here. The jet engines, the incoming radio transmission alert, the sounds of explosions, menu noises, every sound effect from the big ones to the small ones are done well here. Remaining on the note of the sound, it wouldn't be an Ace Combat retrospective if I didn't mention the music. Composed by a variety of people from Tetsukazu Nakanishi, Keiki Kobayashi, Hiroshi Okubo, Junichi Nakatsuru, Katsuro Tajima, and a group of people by the name of the Ace Combat 5 chorus team. Some of my personal favorites from this list are First Flight, Frontline, Hrimfaxi, Closure, The Journey Home, and of course, the Unsung War, just to name a few. Tracks that are able to make you feel like a badass, able to pull at your heartstrings, give you a sense of unity among former enemies who are now allies, putting a stop to the war once and for all, and more are all found here. Once again, the people behind the music have outdone themselves here, perfectly crafted to not only fit with the gameplay of the mission at hand, but also to fit with what we'll be talking about next, the story. Up to this point, we've already been squadron leaders in previous Ace Combat games. Air Combat and Ace Combat 2 had us take on the role of Scarface 1, leader of Scarface Squadron who would give orders to any wingman we'd hire to accompany us on a mission before takeoff. Ace Combat 3 never saw us in a leadership role given who we play as, or rather what we play as, in that game was made to only ever receive orders, not to give them. Ace Combat 4 has us flying solo as Mobius 1 for almost the entirety of the campaign, aside from the last mission where we're leading Mobius Squadron that had been formed in response to Megalith. In other words, up to this point, we've had limited squadron leader roles. It's been more so an honorary title rather than it having any real implications behind it, which is why here in Ace Combat 5, us being a squadron leader feels different. On top of picking out our squadron's aircraft before a mission, we also give out orders to them and communicate with them during the mission. Each of the wingmen that we're in charge of have their own distinct personalities, viewpoints on the war, and personal ambitions. Nagase, call sign Edge, the soft-spoken pilot who wants there to be diplomacy instead of fighting whenever it's possible, but isn't afraid to put her skills on display when push comes to shove. Alvin H. Davenport, call sign Chopper, the comedic and lighthearted one of the bunch who isn't afraid to lighten up the mood even during battle. Laid back, relaxed, yet also able to kick some serious ass when he needs to. Also, the height and muscles this man has, holy. Then there's Grim, call sign Archer, the young rookie who was shoved into service without warning as a result of the early war panic. The one with the least amount of flying time and combat experience out of the bunch, he's able to brush up on not just his flying skills, but also his bravery throughout the war. Lastly, Captain Snow, who joins your squadron later on, a concentrated and focused pilot with plenty of experience already, one who focuses on the mission first and foremost, but is also able to make some room to make sure that everyone else is hanging in there. All of these personalities of your different squad mates, plus with you being able to interact with them through the yes-no response mechanic, equals some great immersion right here. Even more so when the war that you and the rest of Osea are waging against Yuktobania suddenly seems to be kicked into high gear, directly going against the anti-war president's policies of diplomacy out of the blue. You and your wingmen as members of the Osea military still have to abide by the chain of command and carry out your orders, but that doesn't mean that you and your team have to agree with those orders. It's moments like these that not only make you and your squadron more grounded in reality, but it's also through your squad that this game's theme is introduced.
This operation is pointless. These guys are just gonna storm in, head on, following orders. That's how war is fought. That's why I hate it. How could the president authorize an escalation of the war like this? This is insane. We'll get bogged down in this forever. Hey, that Mr. Cargo guy was the president, right? Man, I thought I could believe in him back then. I had no idea he was such a wuss.
No, he's not.
How an arcade flight action game is able to tackle an anti-war theme like this, while also providing enjoyable gameplay and relatable moments with your squadron, is something that needs to be praised. Of course, this may not work for everyone. No matter how carefully you balance something like this, there will be some who find the story full of itself, pretentious, and more. But for those who are able to appreciate what Ace Combat 5 is communicating, to see what the game is trying to say, like I said just now, it needs to be praised. You understand that you have to fly and fight, and in the context of the gameplay, you are rewarded for putting your flying skills on display. But in the context of the story, you can't help but to feel like something is going on. There has to be some kind of misunderstanding or miscommunication going on that is fueling this war. To have to manage your spot in the war along with managing your squad to begin with is something that Ace Combat 5 does beautifully. Ace Combat 5 also has a little bit of world building, with the game's mythical tale of Razgriz, a demon who at first uses its powers to rain death upon the land before dying, and then, after a period of slumber, the demon returns as a great hero. Of course, this is just a story and not actually real, but with your ferocity shown on the battlefield, some of the Yuktobanian troops you fought have given you and your squadron that moniker out of fear. And Ace Combat 5 is also not afraid to show us some really dark realities of war. Rookies losing their lives, attacks on civilians, and Mission 17, Journey Home. Here, you are tasked with flying over a stadium as the Osean Vice President will be giving a speech to rally the people to continue the fight. After that, Yuktobanian aircraft who somehow managed to penetrate Osean airspace begin to attack not just you and your squadron, but also the stadium in an effort to assassinate the Vice President. Allies scramble to come to your rescue as you all fly and fight, but as you're doing your best to hold out,
Are you alright? You've been hit.
Nah, it's nothing big. Not wounded. I ought to be able to keep this plane in the air a little longer. Besides, planes are expendable, right, kid? That's it, kid. That's the kind of line I expect from a captain.
you continue fighting while checking in on Chopper frequently, with the squadron directing him to eject over the stadium once it's all cleared out. And so, you keep on fighting. You keep on waiting. Every second that passes feels like a minute, not just for the wait for ally reinforcements, but also for your squad mates' safety. Finally, the stadium clears out, and
Look, forget about it, Chopper. Just bail out. Please, bail out.
Okay, guess now's the time.
This is Thunderhead. Captain Davenport, are you alright?
There's the stadium. I'm dropping the plane over there.
Roger. Now get out.
I can't. The electrical system's all messed up. The canopy won't blow. Ejection seat's probably not working either.
Don't give up! Chopper! Keep trying! Chopper!
I'm gonna miss that voice.
the silence is deafening. You sit there, shocked, unsure of what to say or do. Then, more targets appear. In your shocked state, you're not even sure that you want to fight anymore. Then, you hear,
These guys are no demons. We can take them.
and you snap. Hands grip the controller in a newly found rage. You grit your teeth and let out a yell that reaches the skies above, swatting down enemy after enemy in a quest to avenge your fallen ally. One of the enemy pilots exclaims,
This is the true power of the Razgriz. Don't lose your confidence. We can still beat them.
You find that for this brief moment, the enemies are easier to destroy. Your unfiltered rage drives you to fly and fight like you've never done so before, as if you've been granted unrivaled capabilities for a brief moment. Perhaps Razgriz, seeing how valiantly you, Nagase, and Grim fought to protect not just the stadium full of people, but your fellow comrade, decided to grant you some of its powers for a brief moment to avenge him. Whatever the case is, you keep on fighting, shooting down as many enemies as possible before finally, allies arrive. You scream at the enemy pilots asking, "Who is next?" But the fight is over now. The fact that no civilian casualties occurred is good to hear, but it does little to soothe the pain that you, Nagase, and Grim are currently feeling. The best that you can do at this moment is to set the controller down, and once AWACS Thunderhead gives the command, and as those F-16s fly by, you give a farewell salute.
Join me in saluting Captain Davenport.
In hindsight, of course, it's the comedic, laid-back favorite among many that gets shot down in the campaign. That seems obvious to us now that we've played it, but given how lots of people reacted when this happened for the first time, it was truly shocking for us. After all, before then, Ace Combat had more or less been about kicking ass and taking names. Yeah, Ace Combat had pulled some serious punches before with character deaths, but not to this extent before. This showed us that Ace Combat 5 was more than just an enjoyable game. This is a game that isn't afraid to show us the dark parts of war in order to tell its story. It's not afraid to confront us with the harsh truth that no matter how much of an ace pilot you are, no matter how concentrated you are regarding making sure that everyone gets through the war alive, people, including those you have more of a connection with, can still die. Chopper's death is one of the few instances in which I have actively cried while playing a video game. I'm normally pretty composed and calm. Heavy-hitting character deaths in games is something that I of course can still feel. I might need to take a minute to gather myself, I might be silent for a minute, I might close my eyes and have a hand to my face, but rarely have I ever shed tears during moments like those. Of course, repeat playthroughs don't have as much of an effect given that you've not only come across this once before, but it's a scripted event. In a gameplay sense, no matter what you do, Chopper is scripted to die in this mission, but that still doesn't take away from the impact that this moment has in the story. To this day, I find that I need to take a breath and get myself ready every time I play this mission. I may not cry anymore, but I still give a salute at the end of the mission and need a minute afterward. This is how you know you've written a character well. To experience genuine, real pain and anguish at a moment like this means you've not only written the character well, but you've done a proper send-off for them as well. It's shortly after this moment that the reason why this war broke out is revealed as well. It turns out that the nation of Belka, looking to enact revenge on some of the countries that beat them to a bloody pulp in the Balkan War from 15 years ago, purposefully set up Yuktobania and Osea to declare war against each other, to see them get a taste of their own medicine for as long as possible, to see both nations weakened from the very weapons that vaporized the pride that Belka had all those years ago. It's at this point that the main objective goes from conquering the other nation to reaching out to them to achieve some sort of understanding. This is made more complicated when, as a result of some actions from a mysterious 8492nd Osean squadron that puts Wardog squadron in a bad light, plus some suspicion regarding other allies, the pilots of Wardog squadron are framed as being Yuktobanian spies. After being presumed dead, the pilots of Wardog squadron now become none other than the Razgriz squadron, named after the legend itself. Now as the newly formed Razgriz squadron, reborn as the legend says, the time to emerge as heroes is now. There's something special about a game that gives you all of the reasons on paper to despise and fight against an enemy, only for the truth to be revealed where you're all of a sudden wanting to team up with that enemy for the sake of ending the war. When those Yuktobanian ships team up with you in Sea of Chaos and you get to hear them exclaim that it's an honor to fight alongside you, all in the name of getting the truth of the war out there, it's beautiful. When both the friendly Yuktobanians and Oseans who understand the true cause of the war all get into formation with you at the beginning of Aces, and you all start singing that song together, it's a moment where you feel your emotions start swelling up. You damn near get to the point of crying again. Out of joy this time, though.
This is the Yuktobanian 703rd Squadron. We heard the President's speech. We will fight with you.
Let us sing that song too. We're going with you. So are we.
This is the Osean 1st Fighter Wing. I just knocked out the brigade commander. We'd also like to help. This is the Yuktobanian 172nd Fighter Bomber Squadron. We love that song too. We brought an AWACS with us.
Beautiful voice. This is AWACS, Okamieva. That would be Sky Eye in your language. We got a message from your boss. I'll patch it in.
You still have a fight ahead of you, but this moment of everyone setting aside their differences and focusing on bringing an end to this horrific war that has taken the lives of so many already is one that you'll remember. Of course, this fight in question is going to be a tough one, as the Belkans have one more trick up their sleeve. If they can't have Yuktobania and Osea destroy each other, Belka will do so itself, utilizing the power of the strategic orbital linear gun, the Solg. Belka's plan is to rain death from the stars on each nation, utilizing the power of kinetic energy weapon shells and a single V2 warhead. Once this plan was discovered, the Razgriz squadron and their allies went after the Solg's control system, shutting it all down. The Solg was then programmed to start heading towards Aured, the capital of Osea. Razgriz squadron goes to intercept the Solg before Aured is wiped out, but not before they come across a combined formation of two enemy ace squadrons. The 8492nd, now revealed to be the Grabach squadron, and another squadron that posed as Yuktobanian pilots during the war, Ovnir. These two squadrons fight Razgriz squadron valiantly, wanting to deliver one final blow as a final act of revenge, an act that would thankfully never come to fruition. Dodging fragments that are falling off the Solg while aiming for the weak points, Razgriz squadron destroys the Solg, saving Aured and ending the war once and for all.
All that's left of their hatred is this thing in front of us.
When history witnesses a great change, Razgriz reveals itself, first as a dark demon. As a demon, it uses its power to rain death upon the land, and then it dies. However, after a period of slumber, Razgriz returns, this time as a great hero.
We won! We did it! Salute the aces of Razgriz! Bravo! Razgriz! Can you hear these cheers? Don't tell me you can't hear them!
Ace Combat 5: The Unsung War has a special place in my heart. While it wasn't the first Ace Combat game I ever played, that honor goes to Ace Combat 6: Fires of Liberation, this was the first PlayStation 2 Holy Trinity title that I played. It was through this game that I truly understood why people loved this franchise. Not only does this game have amazing gameplay, it also proves that hard-hitting and impactful stories can be told even when you're more removed from the brutality of war by being in the air. This balancing act that Ace Combat 5: The Unsung War does in making sure the game is fun, but also intriguing, shocking, and when necessary, emotional, is one that deserves praise. It says something that I and many others who have talked about this game still not only hold it in such high regard, but also still feel those same emotions all these years later. The highs, the lows, for me at least, I still really feel them, even on repeat playthroughs. Of course, not exactly the emotions I experienced the first time in terms of severity, but pretty darn close still nowadays. The excitement of going on an absolute tear against the enemy, the anger and sadness at losing a comrade, the joy of becoming allies with former enemies in order to end the war, I still feel all of that. A game that represents ambitions that once more reached to the skies. Ambitions that successfully took flight, resulting in the second of the 3 legendary Ace Combat titles. No matter how much time passes, Ace Combat 5 will always have a place to call home. Not just literally on our storage devices, but also through word of mouth, both in person and online. And for lots of us, including myself, the game will always have a special place in our hearts. Whether it be our first PlayStation 2 Holy Trinity title, our first game that really immersed us in the story, or even just our first game that had us discover a love of aviation as a whole, this game is still one that we Ace Combat fans would recommend to anyone interested. And it will no doubt be an Ace Combat game that will continue to be cherished and loved by many for years to come.
Journey begins, starts from within. Things that I too slow. The journey has its time and ends. If a man can fly over an ocean, and no mountains can get in his way, will he fly on forever, searching for something to believe? From above I can see, from the heavens, down below see the stars.